Welcome to Unleashed at Work and Home. I'm Colleen Pilar, and this is where pet professionals come for honest conversations about what it really takes to show up for yourself while serving the animals you love. If you've ever felt caught between compassion and exhaustion, you're in the right place. Here we explore what it means to reconnect with your inner wisdom and rediscover the joy that brought you to this work. Make sure to join my email community at colleenpilar.com for gentle, practical insights designed specifically for pet professionals. Now, let's dive in. Welcome back to Unleashed at Work and Home. My guest today is Bob Deeds, and he is a retired canine search specialist with FEMA. Welcome, Bob.
Hi.
So that is not your typical career. Most of us don't know FEMA, canine search specialist. That's not a common thing that every neighborhood has one. Can you tell us a little bit about what that even means? What is that job?
Well, basically, and it's kind of evolved over time. But when I first started, our primary mission was finding a live human being that was trapped in rubble. And of course, as time developed, we were called into different missions, and the overall structure of the mission started to change a little bit. Give you an example: when the space shuttle recovery mission occurred, where it blew up, that was the largest land search in the history of the world. It was about 150,000 square miles, and FEMA's primary mission prior to that was live find. Our feeling was if you're deceased, we can't help you. We're going to focus on bringing people that are alive back. We had handlers that actually had to take their own personal dogs that they used on volunteer teams into that were trained in human remains detection for us to do that mission. And it was a very successful mission, but going forward from that moment, we started working on developing a human remains detection program as well as live find. The other aspect of that particular search that it morphed into a little bit more, our primary, not the primary mission, but our primary focus and training had been collapse structure and rubble. And that started to morph the training into a lot of wide area search, which was more in line where most of our roots came from, which was volunteer search and rescue, prior to getting into the whole, state and federal infrastructure. So that changed the way that we trained, what we trained for, in addition to rubble. We still probably train more rubble than anything. I say we still train. I'm retired, but I'm still. I'll always hopefully be tied into the industry. So when I make it present tense, understand I'm retired, but I still have my finger on the pulse. So when we train now, we still probably train 90% on rubble, and it's because it's very complex. It's three-dimensional. We're not only looking for odor that's coming at us, but coming up to us, from out of the rubble. And we always refer to that as peeling the onion. You may take a section of rubble off and it moves, where you're looking and things like that. So it's extremely complex. It's dangerous. There's no such thing as fake rubble. So even in training, it's extremely dangerous, but it does require a lot of focus and a lot of training to keep that skill up.
Yeah. Hadn't really thought about it from some of those details that you've just shared. There's no such thing as fake rubble is a particularly vivid image of that, when you're training on unstable surfaces.
Well, it's not only unstable, you have rebar, that I've never totally understood this, but you see a piece of rebar that's stuck up, and the point of that rebar, for whatever reason, I've seen rebar that's razor sharp. And you can run into that. The dog can run into that. It's very unforgiving. You just have to have an animal that's in top physical condition, an animal that can move, that is very agile, and people need to be able to do it too. The dogs are at an advantage though, being on all fours.
Mhm.
Um, we always when we're talking to somebody new about going up on rubble as people, we always tell them 3 points of contact. 2 feet and a hand. You don't ever want 2 feet in the face. That's a bad thing.
That is a bad
So
thing.
that's a bad thing. So, those dogs have to be able to move. They have to be confident. All those things, play into it.
So, one thing I love to ask all of my guests is like, when you were 10, what did you think you were gonna be when you grew up? And then I asked them to kinda lead me through the journey of like, can you take me from 10 to being the canine search specialist?
Okay, this is this is a great question. I've never had anybody put it to me quite like that. But at 10 years old, um, this is hilarious. I wanted to be a ballet dancer.
Awesome.
I'm serious. I was very involved in theater, children's theater. Fort Worth, Texas, has the largest children's theater in the world. I mean, it's cool. It's theater in the round. In fact, I think it's the oldest theater in the round in the United States. And they had a great program. I enjoyed it a lot. It was a lot of fun, things like that. So I really didn't even, even though I was very active with my own dogs personally, and I loved it, even at 10 years old, loved to train and stuff like that. That wasn't what I was thinking of as this is what I'll do for a living.
Mhm.
I played football, played baseball, did all the stuff that uh, that little kids do growing up. But my heart was really in theater. That's what I wanted to do.
So then talk me through. You get out of high school and then what?
Well, I actually danced professionally for a little bit. Did some theater, did some summer stock. Went to college, and it wasn't really until later um, that I was on the internet, ran across a website called NASAR. It's National Association of Search and Rescue, and they had a tagline that I read. It said for the both the paid and unpaid professionals. And I saw this, and it's like, what do they mean, unpaid professional? And I found out that at that time, and really it's still like that today, the majority of search and rescue in this country is done on a volunteer basis. The
Mhm.
majority of it is. There's very few people that are blessed and got to do what I got to do and actually get paid to do it. But most of it is on a volunteer basis. And that's the same way that emergency medical service started in the United States.
Mhm.
Back in the day, if you were a funeral home and you had a hearse, it wasn't unusual for them to pop a magnetic red flashing light on top of that hearse and turn it into an ambulance. That they would kind of double dip that, and that was done on a volunteer basis. And then as it started to develop, uh, later on they rolled that into the fire service, and a lot of times had them, take that on before it was even around on a professional level. And even the fire service, about 80% of the fire service today is volunteer. A lot of people don't realize that, but a huge part of it is. So getting to do this on both the state and federal level and actually get a paycheck for it was pretty cool.
Mhm. So you saw that ad and you started learning about it, but what was your day job at that time?
I was actually working. My family had a couple of retail jewelry stores, and I was working with my brother in the family business. And I actually got involved with a volunteer team in the Dallas Fort Worth area called Search One Rescue Team. and phenomenal team. They've been around since about 1983, and this was in the early 90s. Got involved with them. Um, Not too long after I'd been involved with them, the Murrah building happened, the Oklahoma City bombing,
Mm,
and that was the first 24-hour news cycle
yeah.
in the United States, and it had never happened like that before, where you could just sit and watch it. And there were a lot of mornings then that I went to work really tired because I couldn't turn the TV off. I mean, I was up all night watching this, and just blew me away. And you know how you'll look at something and you think, "Wow, I would love to do that," but no, they won't happen. That's so far removed from where I'm at right now. I mean, I train dogs, but it was more for fun, and that's just so far removed from what I do. And thank God I had a different idea, um, because this volunteer team that I was on, one of the guys on this team turned out he was on Texas Task Force One, which was the state team at the time. Was before they had uh, signed a contract with the federal government. And he had a dog, and he asked me to come out and train with him. And I trained with he and his border collie named Peppy. And we started going out. I just got hooked on it. I was doing it 5 days a week. A few years prior to that, I had um, I had just devastated my Achilles tendon. So any thought of ever going forward and dancing again, that was, I said, a few years, that's probably 10 years prior to that, had kind of gone out the window. It just wasn't going to happen anymore. And so this opportunity came along. And then he told me about a year after I started working with him, he said, "Hey, the task force is uh, getting ready to possibly go federal. To have this contract with a deploy on a federal level." And I had a little border collie at the time, good little dog. His name was Merlin, and but Merlin wasn't really suitable for USAR, Urban Search and Rescue, which is the official name of disaster search and rescue. I didn't quite have the nerve strength for it. So I started looking for a dog that I could do USAR with, and luckily found an incredible dog and got her 2 weeks before they had open tryouts with the task force. She knew nothing. They were looking at the raw ability of the dog. I think that was more important to them than the handler. They wanted, they felt like they could get me into shape. They wanted to look at the dog and see that I had a suitable dog, and she rocked it. Just 2 weeks after I had her, they were just doing some raw basic assessment, and she just knocked it out of the ballpark. One year and a couple of weeks after that, we were at the World Trade Center. That was our first deployment.
Wow. Wow. The World Trade Center was your first
Yeah,
deployment.
yeah,
Oh, holy cow.
yeah.
W- What are you willing to share about that experience?
That was it's hard to say. It was probably one of the most pivotal moments of my life as far as everything that's happened after that. It was an extremely devastatingly sad moment. And at the same time, it was one of the proudest moments of my life. We had not even been issued federal uniforms at that time. We had been issued our state uniform.
Mhm.
But the way the task force worked, you're a state asset. If something happens on a federal level, they contact, and it's different from state to state. In our particular state, they would contact our task force, our governor. Um, we would either say yay or nay. We'll deploy to that, and then they would discuss with them what they needed as far as the type of team, the size of team that we would send out the door. You have real heavy rescue and you have heavy search components, and there's some little minor variations in between there as far as assets. and we hadn't been deployed as a federal asset yet. When it first happened, we were actually scheduled to go to the Pentagon, but by the time I got to College Station, which is where my task force was based, it's about a 3 hour drive from Fort Worth. By the time I got there, it had already been uh, rerouted to New York. And that was it. Of course, I like everybody else. You either heard about it on the news, you got a phone call from somebody else that had seen it, or you were listening to the radio. In my case, I was listening to the radio when it happened. I was actually going to work at one of our jewelry stores. I was on the way there. My brother was in a vehicle. I knew he was probably 4 or 5 minutes behind me. And we were listening to this radio program. It was KVIL radio in the Dallas Fort Worth area. A guy named Ron Chapman was like a legendary DJ, and Ron's on there. He was doing some comedy bit, and right in the middle of it, right before he gave the punchline, he stopped. And I actually thought it was part of the comedy bit at first in a real
Yeah.
twisted way. He goes, "Wow, a plane just hit the World Trade Center, hit one of the towers." And then it was like silent for about 10 seconds. And then he said, "Wow, that was a big plane." And he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to cut away to our newsroom, blah, 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 blah." And I realized it was real. No sooner had that happened, my phone rings and it's my brother, and he goes, "Hey man, are you listening to the radio?" I said, "Yeah, I just heard it." He said, "What do you think?" And I had just finished a terrorism awareness course, which was one of the certification courses that we had to go
Hmm.
through. It was like an 80-hour course, and I told him, I said, one of the things they like to do is do a follow up attack. Once they get your attention, they'll do something else, and they want to see if they can, get more airtime, get more publicity. And I said, if something else happens, no. Well, I went on to our store, went into a closet, grabbed a little 13-inch box TV, brought it out, set it on the desk, plugged it in, got the foil up on the antenna set just right, and turned on the TV, and I saw this plane fly into the tower. And I called my brother and I said, "Dude, somebody was filming it." And then they panned back and I saw it was two towers. And I said, "Oh no, that was the second tower." As soon as I said that, this was back in the days of pagers. Okay. As soon as I said that, my pager went off, and any real deployment, possible deployment information started with 911, and it went off 911. And I said, "This is an informational page only. No action is necessary at this time. There has been what appears to be a terrorist attack on both towers of the World Trade Center." And then, of course, as additional stuff happened, that with the Pentagon, with Shanksville, we were getting more and more information. And uh, at this time, this is an important note, we had not passed our certification yet. We were ready to. We were supposed to have a certification, a test. I think it was the following weekend, if I remember right. And we were ready to go out the door, and we had a couple of handlers that had passed the certification to go. We had not done so yet. We being myself and another handler named Denise Corliss. She had a dog named Brittany. Brittany was the last living dog of all those dogs that had deployed in the World Trade Center. Some people remember her name for that. And uh, I guess it was about 1 o'clock that afternoon, and I had been getting pages all morning. But I'd already told my brother, I said, I don't think I'm going to go because I'm not certified. What they'll do is they'll backfill my position, meaning they'll get a hold of another task force and say, "Hey, we need to borrow two handlers that aren't going to deploy to this to fill the slots of the two handlers we need." Well, I got a call from the canine coordinator on my task force, And she called, and I immediately got on the phone and hey, Suzanne, tell them if they want me to come down and help load trucks, I'll do whatever I need to do just to help them get everybody out the door. And I'm talking, and finally she's like, Bob, shut up. And I say, what? And she said, we've talked to Washington, D.C. You're clear. You're going. We want you to go. And I said, you're kidding. She said, no, go get your gear and your dog. And so I left, drove home. I lived about 25 minutes away, got home, grabbed my dog, grabbed my gear. Um, I think I called back down there to uh, verify something. I don't remember what it was. I talked to him again. Um, she said that, we're going to possibly be wheels up in about 4 hours. Uh, so don't kill yourself getting here. Be safe, So I drove down there, got there. At that time, we were based out of a little hangar at Easterfield Airport, which is kind of on the southeastern side of uh, Texas A&M's campus. The fire field was south of the campus, and so I got down there. I went to the hangar, and they, said hang tight, and that's when I learned the phrase that anybody that's ever been in the military, I haven't, but anybody who has knows this. It's called hurry up and wait.
Mm.
And so I'm going through gear. I'm repacking gear probably a dozen times. They had the same, 13-inch TV set up in the room, and we're going by and we're watching that. And then they passed out our uniforms. You could have heard a pin drop. They were handing us these uniforms. Everybody's looking at that American flag, that's right here
Mm.
over a breast pocket. And it was that was an extremely proud moment, to be able to get that.
Yeah.
And we had some additional information or additional equipment passed out to us. We had been through hazardous materials training, but we hadn't received like our mask. We have different types of masks. We have a half mask with a couple of respirators on it. We have a full mask that I refer to as a Scott's mask that you'll typically hook up to a tank that provides air, on your back. And so we were getting different types of personal protective equipment like that. We had to go through medical every time I deployed. We did medical workup, blood tests, EKGs. They wanted baselines so they would know if something happened, how to treat us.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of people on the task force that I met for the first time. I trained with canine handlers. I didn't know all the rescue guys, the guys that break through walls and stuff like that and do the shoring. I didn't know a lot of the medical people. I'd met maybe a couple of the paramedics and maybe one of the doctors, just because the basic physical we had to have when we joined. But all of a sudden, there's a bunch of paramedics and there's a bunch of doctors, and they brought in because they had so many of us had to process. They brought in uh, doctors from like Scott and White and stuff like that, to come in and do the physicals to get us ready. Ended up sitting there, sleeping there for about 4 days before we
Oh,
actually
wow.
went in. Yeah, we were in. You go in and wait. You can't just take
Yeah.
28 teams, divide up a portion for the Pentagon, a portion, for the World Trade Center, and put everybody there at one time. It'd be complete chaos. So they had, they kind of did it by teams that were close. They took, of course, New York Task Force One was already there. That's part of the police department there. They had, some rescue personnel from like New Jersey, even though they didn't have a task force at that time. They were in there. There were some volunteer teams that showed up. I think, if I remember correctly, I think Ohio may have been in that first wave. In fact, I think that's who we actually relieved when we got there, or a few days after we got there. Um, but anyway, we show up, we fly into Fort Dix, which is part of a joint base. It's Fort Dix and Andrews, I believe it is, in New Jersey. If I have that right. Uh, we didn't fly into Fort Dix. We flew into Andrews, which is the Air Force Base, but we stayed at barracks over on Fort Dix. Got there in the evening. Went and had dinner. Uh, we go into the mess hall, put our dogs on a down, stay in the lobby. Went in, ate, came back out, got our dogs, went over to the building. Basically, we're waiting for assignment, and I believe we went out that night for our first group. At that time, they had assigned us. They had assigned me to a day team at that time, um, and I went. I talked to Suzanne, and I said, "Suzanne, I'm wondering about something because Pat Gilliland, who had Peppy, was my kind of one of my mentors at that time. Pat was also a year older than I am now. He was 68 at that time of that deployment. I said, Suzanne, I'm wondering about something. Would it be wiser to put me on a night shift and put Pat on a day shift? Just, I was able to move better at night at that time, than Pat would. And I think about me trying to walk around on rubble at night right now. And I
Mm.
don't even know if I could do it that well in the daytime right now. But anyway, she said, "Yeah, it's a great idea. We'll have you go in on night shift." So we swapped. So it was Joanne Ritz, who had a German Shepherd named Cholo, myself, with my dog Kinsey. We were part of the night shift. Pat, Peppy, Denise, and Brittany were part of the day shift. And then we had rescue personnel broken up in two squads, one for night, one for day. Same with medical, broken up. You have technical search specialists, which have the really cool toys, the listening devices, the long cameras. I think now there's probably some robotics involved and stuff like that we didn't have back in the Stone Ages when I did it. There's a lot more, bells and whistles now, and stuff's probably a lot higher caliber. Um, while we were there, this was kind of cool. We would have, I'm not sure what part of I know it was part of the Army, but I don't know exactly what branch it was from. I have a feeling it was part of Special Operations, Special Forces. They were showing up with cameras that they were giving to our technical guys saying, "Hey, this is a test camera. It's like a one of a kind. Do you want to try to use it?" And some of it had like better optics, better listening capabilities tied into it. They were actually providing us real time with new toys, to
Mm-hmm.
use. Keep in mind, we had never done anything of that magnitude before, not even the Murrow building
Yeah.
was this magnitude. Um, a lot of people think it was a couple of buildings came down. This went on for blocks. I've got a aerial photograph that I acquired after this thing was over with, and it's like 15 blocks around. You could see debris on top of buildings, and that's only because the aerial photo shows about 15 blocks. I have a feeling it goes much further than that, but um, anyway, we got there and um, we went from Fort Dix to there. They had this bus that we were on. We arrived. We go to bank building, Chase Manhattan Bank building. It was around the corner. And, of course, the windows had been broken out of that. That was like a couple of streets over. Um, and they had boarded up, the building. Well, we were using that as our initial base of operations when we got there. And we were waiting to get our first assignment. And they said, okay, we're going to move around. It's going to be really dynamic. So you guys are probably going to be broken up into smaller groups. As we get there, we'll let you know. We walked around the corner and literally 7 seconds. I mean, in the time that we appeared, some New York City firefighters heard and they said, "We need your dog. We need your dog." And Bert Withers, who was my search team manager at the time, Bert was a rescue guy from Houston Fire Department. Bert was the one of the night shift search team manager, big guy, 6'4", 6'5". Bert looks down at me and he said, "Are you ready?" And of course, my initial thought when I walked around that corner, I was scared. I mean, initially, what not for me. I was scared for my dog. I walked around the corner and I'm thinking, man, my dog's going to die. This was horrendous. But the moment we heard that and he goes, "Are you ready?" All my training, it was like it just snapped. It just kicked in. And I said, "Yeah, let's do it." I found out where they wanted me to search. It was over where I believe it was Station 10 with Fire Department New York on that side of the street. The face of one of the buildings had just fallen over and it crushed a fire truck. And I went in, I took her collar off, which all of her dogs work naked. I took her collar off, had her kind of between my legs, had the arms around in front of her chest. I leaned over, I kissed her on the head, and I told her, "You ready, girl? Seek." She took off, she starts searching, and Bart's right over my shoulder. And I remember I turned around, I looked at him, and I go, "Holy cow, it works." It's like she was doing it. There were a couple of guys standing up through this window. The building face was sideways, so there's like a window here, and they're standing up through this window with a cutting board, and they're cutting this. And uh, Kinsey kind of walked by and she barked a couple of times because she's trained to bark at anybody that's alive. And then she stepped back and looked at them and was like, "Okay, not you." And she kept going. And she worked the whole thing. There was nobody there to find, that was trapped. And that was our first shift. Basically, that was the start of our
Yeah.
first shift.
How long were you up there?
Um, I believe, and I trying to remember. I think it was like 11 to 14 days, something like that. I don't remember exactly, but it was something like that, 11 to 14 days. I worked 12-hour shifts. Supposed to work 12-hour shifts. It turned into about after we got our dogs we had a veterinary mass unit, which is part of the federal government. We had to take our dogs through medical and decon, and the rest of the task force would go back to uh, the location where we were sleeping. It was the Javits Center in New York. They would go back, and then they would send the bus back and pick up the canine handlers an hour or 2 hours later, however
Yeah.
long it took us to get through medical. And then you'd go back and you would go into logistics and you would hey, I lost my flashlight or my flashlight got broken or, my microphone and my radio's busted. You'd get that stuff replaced. And usually by that point, Kinsey had already been through decon. I had been through decon, decontamination. Um, I'd already put Kinsey up in her crate so she could start getting some sleep. And then I would go down for another couple hours. Um, and then I would get about 4 or 5 hours sleep. Um, very rough sleep. You're in a room with a bunch of snoring firefighters, and then you get up and you go through briefing. I also had to go through debriefing that morning. That always took to get, I'd get in line, and that would be a couple of more hours. Um, and then the next day, you get up, you go through briefing again, one final equipment check, you get on the bus, and you go back to work again. Day shifts coming off work, you high five everybody, walk by, and then you go down to the pile and start working again.
Yeah.
And that's what it was like. So, uh, extremely surrealistic. Um, One of the things bugged me a lot at first. Doesn't bug me now. It's more of an oddity. But when you would crawl around, like much of it, you're crawling into tunnels to clear areas so they can come in with heavy equipment and pull it out. And I'd find a lot of shoes and stuff laying around, and you get a shoe and you'd put it in your BDU pocket or in your backpack, and you come out, and then when you have a little downtime, you walk around and you try to find the matching shoe. They would have these little walls
Mm-hmm.
with shoes on top. And it's really bizarre because, like, to this day, when I walk into a Kohl's or an department store, through a shoe section, and even talking about it right now, my mouth is watering. It'll end up getting kind of dry. I can actually taste and smell the World Trade Center,
Yeah.
and it's always been like that. It used to bother me. Now it's more. It is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's just part of it. Um, I had a very huge awakening as far as the whole USAR thing and what our mission is on that first deployment. The easiest thing you will ever do as a canine handler is say, there's somebody right here. That's the easiest thing you'll ever do because your dog is sitting there barking. They're doing
Mm-hmm.
what's called a focus bark, indicating live human scent or indicating human remains in today's case. They're all the human remains dogs, even though some were federal handlers, some were volunteers, most of them were not on the pile. They were at a landfill off of the pile. So we were just doing live find on the pile. But the easiest thing you'll ever do is say, little Timmy is right here. My dog is barking.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest thing you will ever do is to look at somebody and say, there's nobody here.
Yeah.
Because if you make a mistake, you just kill somebody. And one of our assignments, we walked up to a hole. There was a ladder that went down about 12, 15 feet, something like that. And there's a fire chief standing there, and the seam on his shoulder is down about the middle of his bicep. So he's wearing a shirt that's like way too big for him. And he looks at me, and his face is covered in soot. In fact, when I first saw him, I thought he was African American. His
Yeah.
face was just completely covered in soot. And when he turned to me, I realized, I could see kind of the white rings, and I could see tear streaks coming through the ash down his face. And I realized he got a field promotion. In other words, the person or people above him had gotten killed, and now he was a chief.
Yeah.
And I said, "What can I do for you?" He said, "I need you to clear this area because we've got to get some of this rubble out of here." I said, "Okay." And we crawled down the ladder. And in fact, something kind of funny happened that uh, brought some levity into that very dark situation. We go down that ladder. I get Kinsey between my legs, bend over, kiss her on the head, and kind of get what my routine is. Told her to seek. She comes out, turns, goes back up the ladder, and disappears. And I look out and I see this chief, his head's turned, looking the other direction. And then he starts laughing, and and he's kind of chuckling, and all of a sudden Kinsey appears over the top of the hole, comes back down the ladder between my legs, and she's like, "Okay, let's go to work." So I send her again, and I don't think anything of it. We come out of that hole about 25 minutes later, and and he's kind of laughing when she comes out, pets her on the head, and I said, "What happened?" And he said, "Well, this firefighter over here had just sat down on a bucket, and he was starting to take a bite out of a hamburger. Your dog came by and did a drive by and stole the hamburger, just ripped it out of his hand, went back in the hall and went to work." But then the levity ended almost immediately, though, because he looked at me again. I could see his eyes tearing up, and he said, "I need you to tell me if we can tear this rubble out of here. Is there anybody down there that's alive?" And I said, "No, there's nobody alive." He said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "I trust my dog. I'm sure."
Yeah.
And we turned and we started to walk away. And I hear him holler, "Let's do it." And I turn around and he's got his finger in the air, spinning it. This big crane with a claw on it comes up and it goes into this rubble and comes down and rips it up, and it's pulling it out and depositing it. And I'm not 20 feet away at this point, walking away. And that's when that hit me, that whole thing about if I just made a mistake, I just
Yeah.
killed somebody.
Yeah.
And man, that the weight of that, I don't think I slept for the next 2 nights. I just kept thinking about that. Man, what if I made a mistake? What if I made a mistake? But you train your dog, you trust your dog, and that's all you can go with. You know,
Yeah.
you have to do it.
You have to do it. I ask all of my guests to share some words that are meaningful to them with me, and I'm thinking about the words that you shared as you're telling these stories. So I'm gonna I'm gonna share with the listeners what you said, and what I'd like you to tell me is w- why these words? When did they come to have meaning for you? So
Yeah.
the quote you shared is 1 Corinthians 13:13. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. And we've all heard this before.
Mhm.
But these are the words that are that have meaning for you on a very personal level. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, and that's something that's different, but it's still tied into SAR in a way. Um, and it has to do with my faith. Okay, I'm a Christian. I've been a Christian for a long time, since I was like 9 years old, but I haven't always lived like a Christian. And uh, I was more of a Christian by label. And back in I think it was 2022, I believe we moved here in 2023, if I'm getting it right. I may be wrong on the year, but anyway, in September of that year, I got a call from Becky Switzer. She's the wife of Barry Switzer, the retired football coach that was a coach at OU and for the Dallas Cowboys. And they have a foundation in Oklahoma called Ground Zero. And Ground Zero trains dogs for disaster search and rescue, gives those dogs at no charge to handlers, um, to help them, so that a lot of these fire departments, they have handlers that are learning to be handlers. They don't really have any experience in training and stuff like that. And she called and she said, we don't have a training director right now. Could you come and be our training director? It's just an interim deal, just for a few months, until we get somebody, unless it's a position that you would want to do. And I said, well, Becky, it turns out it's perfect timing, but I can't take it on in a permanent role. I said, I've got made a commitment to my wife on something. She wanted to move to Tennessee because her sister's up here. She'd always lived by my family, and for 16 years, when my pager went off, she quit whatever she was doing and I left. I went out the door. Um, I said, I've got to be fair now. It's time for my wife to get to do some stuff. And so I made that commitment to her. But if you want me to come up there for, September through December, I'll be happy to help you. And hopefully during that time we can find somebody. And, so I agreed to do it. I came up there and I had a little travel trailer there. The internet in Tuttle, Oklahoma is lacking. And we get so spoiled, we stream stuff constantly. We can turn the news on, you can worst case scenario, you can have a satellite or something. We really didn't have anything. They had some internet, but it was real spotty at best, very slow. It was so slow I couldn't really stream anything. About all I could do was check email. And I had some trade magazines. I had like some police canine magazines and uh, read read a lot of Karen Fryer books and uh, I had saved some video. I'd been through some of Bob Bailey's chicken workshops, and I had saved some videos, and I was going back and watching videos of me training chickens. And you can only watch yourself train chickens so many times.
It's very humbling.
No, I tell you, wow, extremely humbling. That's a whole nother thing. When I
Indeed.
learned more about training dogs, training chickens, than by training chickens than anything I've ever done. But anyway, I came across a Bible that I had in there. I didn't even realize it was in there. It was one that I'd gotten when I was a teenager, and I got it out and just started reading some stuff in it, and um, started to awaken some stuff in me. And fast forward to December, a buddy of mine had been over at both, he'd gone between Iraq and Afghanistan, training dogs for private contractors. And at one point in time, he had well over 200 teams under him between two different theaters of war. And I called him one night, or messaged him first, said, "Hey, can I give you a call?" He said, "Well, let me call you. I'll call you on satellite phone." So this was like, and I think it was after midnight one night we talked. And I said, "Hey, I got a proposition for you." And he's like, "What?" I said, "Are you interested in working back in the States again?" And he said, "Well, it depends. What is it?" He said, "I'd love to." He said, I'm really tired of, uh, going into bomb shelters every night, under rocket attack and stuff like that. And so I told him about it, and anyway, set it up for him to come in and take over the position that I had on a temporary basis. And he agreed to it. So fast forward to December, he called me and he said, "Hey, can you come in like the first week of January, or just spend about a week with me and let kind of show me what's going on. I want to bounce some stuff off of you, and kind of set me up for success." And I agreed to that. Anyway, I come in and the Ground Zero's got a really cool, like it's like a ranch. Think of it as a ranch. It's a big piece of property. I think it's it's like 65 acres, or it's either 65 or 165. I don't remember, but it's something 65 acres.
Sizable.
Sizable. Anyway, so I go to the ranch house. I walk in. David's there. Hadn't seen him in 20 years. We hug each other, shake hands. He's on one side of the island in the kitchen. I'm on side of the other, and we're sitting there just talking. And all of a sudden he said, "I got a surprise for you." And you could hear some people walk in the other part of the house. He comes in. It's another buddy of ours, a guy named Mark Marshallay. Mark, when I met him, was in charge of canine for the Houston Police Department, and David and Mark were both handlers on the task force. They joined at the same time I joined, and so Mark comes in. There's another guy there named Brandon. Brandon was from South Africa. He had been a handler that worked for David over in Iraq, and was going to come and work for David at Ground Zero. Well, anyway, we come in there. Mark had just gotten back from the store, and he had Subway sandwiches with him. And he throws a sandwich, hits me in the chest with it, and I get it. And I'm opening it up, and we're doing guy banner, back and forth. And I started to take a bite of the sandwich, and Mark goes, "Stop!" And I said, "What?" And he said, "We're gonna pray, to bless the food. And we all joined hands. It was four men together joining hands, and it blew me away. It was just so powerful. And I remember calling Karen on my way home and saying, Karen, something's happening with me, and there's something with my relationship with God that's taking place. And of course, after that, fast forward, we moved to Tennessee. And I don't know if you've ever been in the Memphis area, but there are churches on every corner and sometimes on the block within, between the two corners. And so I found a church that was here that I absolutely loved. It's a men's group that I'm a part of now that I love. And so that verse is when I started to really look at myself, and there's more of myself that's getting revealed to me every day. And my Christian faith is something that's just the center of my life now, and it's very, very important to me, very important. And so that's why that particular verse is probably that's my favorite Bible verse. That as we know ourselves, as we become, things are revealed to us, we'll be able to abide with Christ, which is both through faith, hope, and then the most important thing is love.
Yeah.
And that is just everything to me.
It's so beautiful, Bob. I love how you said more of myself that's getting revealed every day. And I think that's the work
Mhm.
that each of us is doing in our own way all the time.
Yeah,
It's a coming out, a blossoming and a blooming of what was always in there, but more of
right.
myself that's getting revealed every day. That's so, so beautiful. Thank you.
And
Um,
something else on that too that I think is important. Um, the way that I train, okay, I choose to train. I don't want to use compulsion. Okay, I want to do positive reinforcement based training. And for me, when I look at what it says in the Bible in Genesis, there's a word in there that's always bothered me. It's been in the King James version. It says we have dominion over the animals. And if you look at dominion, that word comes, the English word, it's to dominate, which is a very harsh word, and that's always
mhm,
bothered me. But I went back and I did a little bit of research, and the Hebrew word that comes from is Ra. It's spelled a couple of different ways: Raha and Rahaj. Raha, and it means to rule over, and it's right after we learn that God is this benevolent ruler, and we learn about love and everything, and so that even goes into to uh, my philosophy and our philosophy as our company, and the way that we train,
mhm.
is love. I mean, the blessing that we have as dog trainers. I'm a grown man. I haven't had a real job since the jewelry store. I am a grown man, and I've gotten to play with dogs.
Mhm.
That is a blessing beyond belief.
It is beautiful. It is such a beautiful thing. If people wanted to learn more about you and your work, how could they do that?
Best way would probably be email, just to get a hold of me, and I will respond. We have, this is the world's longest email, but it's info at, and then deeds, which is our last name, D as in David, EEDS, canine spelled out, CANINE, connection spelled out, CONNECTION.com. Info at deedscanineconnection.com. And shoot us an email. That comes to Karen and I both, which is a good thing because we'll say, "Did you see this?" "No, I didn't." "Okay, look at that." We're both looking at emails, so you don't only get me when you send an email to that. You get Karen too. You'll reach both of us, but that's the best way. I have a passion for helping new handlers, people or people that are interested in that. And I'll point you in the right direction to get you going. I think it is one of the most incredible callings in the world, to to do search and rescue. I really do. But yeah, shoot me an email, sure.
Okay, and I will link that up in the show notes so that if anyone made a typo, they'll have it correct
All
there.
right, very
So,
good, very good.
well, this has been such a pleasure and a privilege to talk with you today, Bob. Thanks so much for coming on with me.
You bet, you bet. Enjoyed it.
That's our conversation for today. If something we talked about resonated, I invite you to sit with it. Notice what feels true and what you want to explore further. You don't have to have it all figured out to start moving toward what matters. Whatever showed up for you today, clarity, questions, even resistance, trust that it's pointing you towards something important. For more support, join my weekly notes at colleenpilar.com. And until next time, remember, you are enough. Always. Just as you are.